When you think of the smartest criminals in history, you probably picture high-tech hackers, bank robbers cracking safes, or con artists pulling off million-dollar scams. And sure, those criminals are clever, but none of them comes close to Pablo Escobar. Pablo Escobar built a global smuggling network and created new systems no one had seen before. He set up his own fleet of airplanes, built secret airstrips hidden in the jungle, and even used small submarines to move illegal goods into other countries. When police and military forces tried to block his routes, Escobar used lookouts, coded radio messages, and even fake shipments to throw them off. He constantly studied law enforcement tactics, staying one step ahead by moving operations and changing methods faster than they could react. Escobar also understood that controlling people was just as important as moving products. He created entire neighborhoods for poor families, building houses, schools, and even hospitals. In return, these people warned him when police were near and hid him when he was on the run. His silver or lead policy meant every official had two choices: take a bribe or face violence. Most took the money. Even after his arrest, Escobar used his negotiating skills to convince the government to let him design his own prison. It had a nightclub, soccer fields, and luxury suites for his guests, and from the inside, he kept running his empire like nothing had changed. D.B. Cooper's crime wasn't the biggest, but it still was one of the most brilliant and puzzling in history. In 1971, a man calling himself Dan Cooper boarded a Northwest Airlines flight heading from Portland to Seattle. He was calm, polite, and incredibly prepared. Shortly after takeoff, he handed a note to a flight attendant, claiming he had a bomb in his briefcase. He then demanded $200,000 in cash and 4 parachutes. When the plane landed, the airline delivered exactly what Cooper asked for. He released the passengers, but kept the flight crew, ordering them to fly to Mexico City at low speed and low altitude, a plan designed to allow a mid-air jump. Somewhere over the forests of Washington or Oregon, Cooper opened the rear stairs and parachuted into the night, disappearing completely. What made Cooper so intelligent wasn't his daring escape, it was the level of careful planning. He knew the type of plane that had a rear staircase he could open mid-flight. He studied flight paths, weather patterns, and even picked clothes that would help him blend in. To this day, no one knows who he really was or if he survived, making him the only skyjacker in U.S. history to completely escape without leaving a trace. Al Capone was tough, but he was also smart. Capone treated organized crime like a business, and he ran it better than almost anyone in history. During the 1920s, when alcohol was banned, Capone built a secret system to supply it anyway, earning over $100 million a year. Capone knew violence alone wouldn't make him king. He set up a network of lawyers, accountants, and even friendly police officers to protect his operations. Every illegal bar, shipment, and deal was part of a carefully planned system, with Capone at the top controlling every move. He also understood that public image mattered, so he gave free food to poor families during the Great Depression. Newspapers printed pictures of him smiling with children, calling him a modern Robin Hood, even though his empire was built on bribery, smuggling, and brutal turf wars. One of Capone's smartest moves was how he handled enemies. Instead of open fights, he used spies, bribes, and surprise attacks. There was the infamous St. Valentine's Day Massacre, where his men, dressed as police, tricked rival gangsters before gunning them down. In the end, though, it was his own bookkeeping that brought him down. He was convicted of tax evasion. Ted Kaczynski was a genius. By the time he was 16 years old, he had already been accepted to Harvard University, where he studied math. Later, he became a college professor, before walking away from everything to live alone in a tiny cabin in the woods. Even in that cabin, with no electricity or running water, Kaczynski used his devious mind to build dangerous homemade devices. For nearly 20 years, Kaczynski sent carefully designed packages to scientists, business leaders, and universities across the country. Each package was built with extreme attention to detail, using materials that were almost impossible to trace. He even removed fingerprints and disguised handwriting to make sure nothing could link back to him. Kaczynski also knew how to manipulate the media. In 1995, he demanded that major newspapers publish his 35,000-word manifesto, which explained why he believed modern technology was destroying humanity. He bet that his writing would protect him, but it backfired. His own brother recognized the style and alerted the FBI, leading to his arrest. Even after capture, Kaczynski's case became required study for investigators learning how to catch criminals who leave almost no clues. His mix of brilliant planning, technical skill, and deep knowledge of law enforcement techniques made him one of the most intelligent and feared criminals of the 20th century. Frank Abagnale Jr. didn't need a gang, weapons, or threats to become one of the most famous criminals in history. He used his brain. Starting when he was just 16 years old, Frank used his intelligence, charm, and quick thinking to pull off some of the boldest tricks ever seen. His first scheme was simple but clever. He figured out how to change the numbers on checks to take money away from banks without anyone noticing. But that was just the beginning. Over the next few years, Frank pretended to be an airline pilot, doctor, and even a lawyer, all without any real training. He faked diplomas, created fake IDs, and even tricked real professionals into trusting him. Even when police chased him across countries, Frank used fake identities and passports to stay ahead. Frank's story became so unbelievable that it inspired the movie Catch Me If You Can. After finally being caught, he used his criminal knowledge to help the FBI stop other con artists. Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán was a planner, a builder, and a problem solver. From the start, El Chapo used his brain to find new ways to move products, avoid capture, and control his rivals. His smartest invention was a network of secret tunnels built under homes, farms, and even the U.S. border. These tunnels had lights, rails, and ventilation, and let his people move faster than police ever could. El Chapo also studied how police and military forces operated so he could stay one step ahead. Whenever they got close, he used tricks like safe houses with secret escape hatches or fake walls that hid staircases. In 2015, he even escaped from a maximum security prison through a mile-long tunnel his team dug straight to his cell, complete with a motorcycle on rails. El Chapo's genius was all about control. He built strong alliances, collected information on enemies, and used both rewards and threats to stay in power. Even when he was arrested, his network ran smoothly because he had already planned for it. Bernie Madoff used trust, numbers, and his sharp mind for his criminal endeavors. For over 40 years, Madoff ran what became the largest financial scam in history, stealing an estimated $65 billion from investors all over the world. Madoff's brilliance came from understanding how people think. He knew that if he made his investment firm look too successful, people might get suspicious. So instead, he promised steady, believable returns. Not too big, not too small. That made investors feel safe. Even wealthy banks, charities, and celebrities trusted him completely. But behind the scenes, Madoff's entire operation was a lie. Instead of investing money, he used new investors' cash to pay fake profits to older investors. A classic Ponzi scheme, who we'll talk about later in this video, but on a massive scale. Madoff was so smart about hiding the truth that even his own employees didn't know the full story. For years, government regulators missed the warning signs because Madoff used his reputation, charm, and deep knowledge of financial rules to avoid serious questions. Even when experts raised concerns, Madoff used his power and influence to make the doubts disappear. H. Holmes, born Herman Webster Mudgett in 1861, was highly intelligent from a young age. He attended the University of Michigan Medical School, where he stole cadavers from the lab, faked their identities, and collected life insurance money by claiming they died in accidents. And this was only the beginning of his criminal schemes. In 1886, Holmes moved to Chicago, where he opened a pharmacy using the fake name Dr. H. Holmes. When the original owner mysteriously disappeared, Holmes took over the entire building. He then purchased the empty lot next door and personally designed a 3-story building with a pharmacy, hotel rooms, and secret areas. Holmes hired and fired workers constantly, so no one ever understood the full layout. Inside, there were soundproof rooms, staircases that led nowhere, trap doors, and secret hallways. Some rooms were airtight with hidden gas lines that Holmes would use on his guests. There was also a greased chute slide that led straight into the basement. In the basement, Holmes set up a crematorium, acid pits, and a medical table with tools for dissection. Some victims' bodies were stripped for bones, which Holmes sold to medical schools. Holmes used fake names, forged papers, and fake businesses to borrow money and trick suppliers. He was also engaged to several women at once, many of whom disappeared after signing life insurance policies that listed Holmes as the beneficiary. By the time he was caught, Holmes had admitted to at least 27 murders, though investigators suspected far more. The Pink Panthers are a highly organized network of thieves, responsible for some of the most brilliant and daring jewel heists in history. Experts believe the group includes hundreds of members, many from Serbia, Montenegro, and other parts of Eastern Europe. The Pink Panthers are known for careful planning, fast getaways, and leaving almost no evidence behind. The group earned their nickname after the 2003 robbery in London, where they hid a stolen diamond in a jar of face cream, just like a scene from the movie The Pink Panther. Since then, they've stolen over $500 million in jewelry from stores in more than 30 countries, including France, Switzerland, Japan, and Dubai. What makes the Pink Panthers especially brilliant is their attention to detail. They study store layouts, security systems, police response times, and even the schedules of nearby traffic lights to plan the fastest escape routes. In some cases, they wore disguises, including wigs and fake mustaches, to avoid identification. They've also cracked high-tech safes in minutes, sometimes using tools they custom-built for each job. Even after decades of arrests, the full group has never been caught, and many of their stolen gems have never been recovered. Meyer Lansky wasn't a gangster in the usual sense. He rarely carried a gun or got into street fights. Instead, Lansky used his brain to become the financial mastermind behind organized crime in America. Lansky helped build the National Crime Syndicate, a massive network connecting Italian, Jewish, and Irish criminal groups. His biggest talent was money laundering. Lansky was one of the first criminals to set up offshore bank accounts, hiding millions of dollars in countries with weak banking laws, like Switzerland and the Bahamas. In the 1940s and 1950s, Lansky helped build Las Vegas. He invested in some of the first casinos and made sure crime families got a cut of the profits. He also controlled illegal gambling operations in Cuba before Fidel Castro took over and shut them down. Lansky was careful. He never put his name on anything and avoided flashy shows of wealth, which made it hard for law enforcement to link him directly to crimes. Despite being arrested several times, he was almost never convicted because his financial records were nearly impossible to trace. Charles Lucky Luciano was a gangster, and he was the brains behind modern organized crime in America. Born in Italy in 1897, Luciano moved to New York City as a child, where he quickly learned that being smart mattered more than being tough. By his early 20s, Luciano was already working with some of the most dangerous gangs in the city. But he saw a bigger opportunity. At the time, Italian gangs were fighting with each other for power. Luciano used his intelligence to end the old system, where everything was based on family ties. He created the Commission, a national board of directors for organized crime. This allowed different gangs to work together, split profits, and avoid unnecessary wars. It was the first time crime families were run like a business, with rules, meetings, and agreed territories. Luciano also knew how to diversify criminal profits. Under his leadership, gangs didn't just rely on illegal alcohol during Prohibition. They expanded into gambling, loan sharking, and labor racketeering, making them much harder to shut down. In 1936, Luciano was sentenced to decades in prison for controlling a large solicitation ring. But even behind bars, he kept running his empire by passing messages to trusted associates. During World War II, Luciano actually helped the U.S. Navy secure New York docks, yet another example of his ability to think ahead and protect his power. Israel Keyes stands out as one of the most organized and methodical criminals ever caught. He used careful planning, research, and self-control to avoid leaving clues. For over a decade, Keyes committed a string of burglaries, bank robberies, kidnappings, and murders, all without attracting attention. Key's most intelligent and chilling trick was how he prepared for his crimes. Years before actually choosing a victim, he would hide equipment kits in remote locations across the United States. These kits contained weapons, gloves, zip ties, cash, and even tools to get rid of evidence. He buried them near places he planned to visit, meaning he could fly or drive across country with nothing suspicious in his bags, then dig up his kit when it was time to act. He also avoided patterns. King chose victims randomly, avoiding places near his home, and committed crimes in different states, which made it almost impossible for law enforcement to connect the dots. Key was only caught after slipping up once. After taking the life of one of his victims, Key used that person's debit card too close to the crime scene. When finally questioned, he confessed to at least 11 murders, though investigators believe there may be many more they'll never solve, thanks to his careful planning and intelligence. Born in Austria-Hungary in 1890, Victor Lustig was a brilliant con artist whose scams were so clever they're still studied today. Lustig spoke 5 languages fluently and could charm almost anyone. That charm, combined with his quick thinking and deep understanding of human greed, made him one of the most successful swindlers. Lustig's most famous con happened in 1925, when he pretended to be a French government official. He invited a group of wealthy scrap metal dealers to a secret meeting and told them the French government was secretly planning to sell the Eiffel Tower for scrap because it was too expensive to maintain. Using fake documents and his natural charm, Lustig convinced one dealer to bribe him to secure the winning bid. Then he disappeared with the money. Amazingly, after getting away with it, Lustig returned to Paris a few months later and pulled off the exact same scam on a different group of businessmen. Both times his victims were too embarrassed to report the crime. Lustig also ran countless other scams, including a money box that he claimed could print perfect $100 bills using special chemicals. Victims paid huge sums for the box, only to realize too late it was a worthless trick. Even after his eventual arrest, Lustig escaped from prison by tying together bed sheets and climbing out of a window, another sign of his quick mind and daring nature. Carl Gugasian spent years studying how to rob banks perfectly. After serving time in juvenile detention for trying to rob a candy store, he earned a degree in mathematics and later completed a PhD in statistics. He even studied military tactics, all of which he would later use to plan his crimes. Gugasian specialized in small-town banks, especially ones near forests or wooded areas. He chose locations where he could escape into the trees, leaving police with no clear trail to follow. Before every robbery, Gugasian spent weeks studying the area, including traffic patterns, local police schedules, and even nearby hunting trails. He often wore frightening masks, like a detailed skull face, to confuse witnesses and hide any clues about his appearance. His getaways were carefully timed, and he always had pre-planned hiding spots where he could ditch his vehicle or change clothes. Over 30 years, Gugasian is believed to have committed more than 50 bank robberies, where he stole an estimated $2 million. When he was finally caught in 2002, FBI agents were shocked by the amount of detailed research, maps, and notes he saved, proof of just how much thought went into every single crime. Charles Ponzi didn't invent the idea of using new money to pay old investors, but he's the reason it's called a Ponzi scheme today. Born in Italy, Ponzi moved to the United States in 1903 with only a few dollars in his pocket, and he was constantly thinking of clever ways to make money fast. His most famous scheme started in 1919 when he noticed an opportunity with international reply coupons, special stamps people could buy to cover postage in different countries. Ponzi realized he could buy the coupons cheaply in countries with weak currencies, then redeem them for higher value stamps in the US. In theory, the idea was legal, but Ponzi never actually ran the business. Instead, he promised investors massive returns, 50% profit in just 45 days. Thousands of people handed over their savings, believing Ponzi's story, but there were no real profits. Ponzi simply used money from new investors to pay older ones, creating the illusion of success. Ponzi's intelligence and charm kept the scam going, even when reporters and officials started asking questions. He created fake ledgers, bribed postal workers, and constantly invented excuses to explain how his system worked. At its peak, Ponzi was making $250,000 a day, more than a fortune in 1920. But when the truth came out, his empire collapsed instantly and left investors broke and Ponzi headed to prison. Thank you for watching the video and making it all the way to the end. We hope you enjoyed it and maybe learned something. Comment down below on what videos you'd like to see from this channel in the future. We're always working on new stuff to put out and it'd be great to hear from you. And click on the video here to check out what YouTube thinks you might be interested in. Thanks again. See you next time.